Well, I think we all know few companies innovate as much as Google. And last year's interaction designer, Richard Tay, showed us the beautiful Google Glass film that went viral and inspired the product he worked on. Today, we meet the maker of the film and the creative lead of the creative lab. He began his career as a motion graphics designer in the music industry. His collaborators read like a who's who of contemporary culture, from David Byrne to Nike, Coke, Puma, you name it. Some of his projects may transform the lives of billions, like the seemingly impossible Project Loon, bringing internet to the world through balloons. He's so good, his job title calls him creative twice. Please welcome the outstandingly creative Steve Rura.
Thank you, David. That was quite the intro. I don't think of myself as that creative, but I appreciate that. See if this clicker's working. Okay, so as David mentioned, I work for Google Creative Lab. That's in New York City, and I'm a designer and a creative director there. But first of all, before I show you some work, let me tell you a little bit about the company that I work for. So maybe some of you have seen this before. This is Google's mission statement. Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now, this has been the mission statement since the company first went public as a search engine, but it's been about 17 years and is much bigger and does much more than search. But when I think back on the projects that I've worked on, there's one word in here that really stands out to me, and that's this word, accessible. So I think, in short, everything that Google does is making technology that removes a barrier and gives access to something that people want or need. If it's search, that's access to information. If it's maps, that's access to physical places, maybe a place you've never been before. If you're a business, you can go online and get access to new customers, etc. So here's Google. It's a big melting pot of creative technology ideas, all with the potential to provide some kind of access. And then you have the user, an ordinary person who may benefit from one of these inventions once they're out in the world and ready. We as Creative Lab kind of sit in between, and it's our job to take what's coming out of Google and communicate it in a way that makes people understand it, that they have to be able to find it, it has to make sense, they have to know how it can help them. And that leads me to the theme that I want to talk about today, which is design for access. So what can design do to enable technology to give access to people, access to things that people really want or need? So let me talk about a little bit how we're structured as a team. First of all, on the creative side, we have designers like myself, of course, represented by googly eyes. Then we have writers, copywriters, narrative writers. We have creative technologists, who are kind of a hybrid between coding and design. And they're really, they make prototypes, they make visualizations, etc. We have filmmakers that specialize in motion graphics, directing, editing. And then we have a program called the Google 5, which is a paid externship program. We take a bunch of applications, people just out of school, we pick 5 of them, and then we put them in the mix for a year. Then on the business side, we have producers. They really take creative ideas and make them happen. Those of you that work in agencies know the value of this role, super important. And then you have the business-minded people, marketing, operations, all the people that really keep things going and keep us on track with the rest of the company. And then lastly, we have the leaders in kind of the spine of the group. These are the VPs and executive creative directors and people who lead. So this looks very orderly and organized and neat, the way I've laid it out here, but the way we actually work is a bit more like this. We break down into smaller teams that are very fluid, a flat hierarchy. They can move very quickly, and that way we do a lot of projects, so we can also focus on individual teams to different projects. But we also work with outside agencies as well, which is very important because we don't want to just stay within the walls of the company and think about things. It's really important to collaborate with people outside the walls of the company to bring new ideas and who can collaborate on us with talent. And then Googlers. Does everybody know this term, Googlers? I feel like I take it for granted. Basically, a person who works for Google is a Googler. And so this is really to represent that we do communicate quite often with the rest of the company. We're not just that isolated. And these are the people, engineers, product teams that really are at the heart of Google. So the first theme I want to talk about is access to infrastructure, specifically access to the internet. So today, about 2/3 of the entire globe does not have any internet access. And this is changing rapidly. It's expected by 2017 a billion more people will come online, mostly from remote and rural areas. So as more people are coming online, how do we address this? Do we build more infrastructure like this, ground towers? They can be expensive, they can be damaging to the environment, they can be difficult or almost impossible to build in very remote areas. Wouldn't it be a lot nicer if you didn't see them at all, if the infrastructure felt invisible? Well, that's exactly what Project Loon is trying to do. So David mentioned this. He explained what it is. It's basically a network of high-flying balloons in the stratosphere that provide internet instead of through ground structures. So our job as Creative Lab was to take this idea that was being worked on by the engineers, give it a name and a logo, which was a little bit of branding, but more importantly, the story. What is this technology? Why is it important to tell the world about it? So as I said, the balloons fly very high in the stratosphere, about 20 kilometers up, so you can't see them with the human eye. You can if you look very closely and you happen to catch a tiny pinprick of light, but they're essentially like weather balloons, so they're really out of the way, and they're meant to connect these rural and remote areas that are coming online, but also to fill coverage gaps in places that are already connected with the internet, because we've all experienced drops in Wi-Fi and signal, and at this point, we really try to take that for granted. And then another important thing is after disasters happen, we can bring communities back online. So we started this project. We have this philosophy in Creative Lab to really learn by making. So to understand this, we went and we collaborated with the engineers. We made an internal film. This is a short documentary about the project, about how it worked. There you see a few of my colleagues, it's Tu and Tristan on the right, a very small team, talking to Rich. He's one of the engineers on the Loon team, the guy who actually proposed the idea in the first place. So we never needed to launch that publicly, but we used it as a tool to really understand the project. We had a good idea of how the technology works and what the problems are, but we were missing the story of why. And so we went back to the balloon itself and looked at the string of the balloon. You have a bunch of balloons floating in the air, and what ties them together but a string and a neat little bow. So we took the idea of a string and we started to illustrate a story. It became a real metaphor for connectivity itself, and as it made different illustrations, it could start to tell why we should connect people to the internet. So this is the very first storyboard of the concept. But as we developed the video, it took on a more literal rendering of the string and became very storybook-like and whimsical and reflective of the name itself, Loon. So let me go ahead and play that for you, introducing Project Loon.
Sometimes everyone isn't really everyone. Like when people say, everyone's on the internet, because the truth is, for each person that can get online, there are two that can't. And when you look closer, that everyone looks even less like everyone. In some places, it's more like 1 in 1,000. In others, it's 1 in 10,000. And in some places, no one's online at all. But what if there was a way to light up the entire globe and finally make all the world's information accessible to all of the world's people? Well, even though today 1 in 3 kids can't get to a real secondary school, everyone could have secondary school come to them. In places where there aren't enough doctors, everyone could be helped by doctors in other places. Farmers everywhere could start using better weather data, so everyone could enjoy a bigger harvest. And because small businesses that are on the internet grow twice as fast, everyone could create new opportunities for everyone. But how do we bring the internet to everyone? Maybe finding an answer starts with looking somewhere new, like up, and trying something different. Like balloons. Yep, that's right, balloons. Because it turns out that if you use balloons, it's actually faster and easier and cheaper to give everyone the internet than it is to give some people the internet. That's why we're giving it a try, and why there's hope that someday soon, everyone really will mean everyone.
So we put that video out into the world and announced Project Loon publicly. And the first pilot test happened in Christchurch, New Zealand, in June 2013. There you see a balloon going up over the Southern Alps. And a farmer named Charles Nimmo was the first person to connect to the balloon-powered internet. There was also an event at the Air Force Museum of New Zealand where you could go and see the balloons up close. This is the size of the balloon when it's fully inflated up in the stratosphere. And Prime Minister John Key came out and announced the event in person, which was really great to see because although Google may be building this infrastructure, it can only be a success if countries really want to adopt it and really see the value. So looking into the future, as more pilot tests happen and as more countries went to adopt Loon, we made sure the identity was easily customizable and could speak to any business, cause, organization, etc. So about a year later, in June 2014, in Brazil, there was another pilot test, this time in Agua Fria. This was at a rural school. You see the ground antenna being installed on the roof of the school building. And then the kids came out for the launch event. We're really excited. It was a bit of a spectacle in this rural village. And then there's Mike Cassidy, the project lead, the Loon engineering lead, connecting the classroom for the first time. So I want to play just one other short video just to give you a sense of what the pilot test was like. We did not create this video in Creative Lab. It was put out by the Loon team themselves, but it gives you a good sense of what happened.
Quando a gente vem da zona urbana para cá, a gente não acha que o mundo deles seja pequeno, mas que a gente pode ampliar esse mundo dele através da tecnologia. Então não justifica um aluno no 6º, no 7º ano, já praticamente para o ensino médio, tendo que pegar o que tem e o que não tem para ir para Campo Maior, para poder ir para uma lan house, tendo que ir para debaixo de uma árvore. Isso não justifica.
O Brasil ainda tem muita gente desconectada, tem aí para mais de 100 milhões de pessoas que ainda não têm acesso à internet e que estão em áreas remotas. O Loon vai ser muito útil trazendo as antenas voadoras que enxergam as áreas de cima e não tem toda a dificuldade de atravessar florestas ou atravessar montanhas.
Eu preciso incluir meus alunos nessa era digital, porque só assim eles vão crescer quanto estudante, quanto pessoa e poder trazer o crescimento para a própria comunidade dele.
Agora que eu não vou embora mesmo daqui da Água Fria.
So in that video, you could see the school principal talking about how she really wanted her students to be part of the digital era. And that leads me into the second part of my talk. I want to mention access to education. So once you have infrastructure in place and you can connect to the internet, what do you really do with it? What is the role of technology in schools? Should it be there at all? How much of it should be there? How should it function? And what can it really give access to? So I want to introduce you to this team. This is the Google Classroom team. We met them. They started in our New York office. And a few of us in Creative Lab were really excited about what they were doing and reached out to collaborate. And unlike Project Loon, where we were telling a story to the world and kind of announcing a test pilot, our role in this project was to inspire the team and tell a narrative back to them. So we imagined possibilities of what the product could be, almost writing a fiction for it, and then played it back to them as they continued to write the software. So where did we start? First, ask some teachers. So we didn't want to sit in an office and just imagine the next great tech solution. So we asked 45 teachers, what really stops you from teaching the way that you would like? We got over 600 individual responses. So I just want to play one section of that research now to give you an idea of what teachers were saying.
One of the things I do is grade papers grade papers, and grade more papers, and it takes away from what I really want to do.
So this is the stack of papers I had to grade just this weekend.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, all 28 of my kids take a math facts test with 100 questions on it. It takes me so long after school to grade all of them.
I'm grading it using a different scale than what they get in the classroom, which looks like this. Then I have to record it on here, and then I have to take this and put it on the computer.
Here I'm going to be sending an email to a parent. I'm going to then check it off on my list so I know who I contact. Then I'm going to go onto our grading system, and I'm going to catalog it amongst the other contacts of that parent. And we have to give every student a pretest, and all 80 of my kids get a total up and get a level. From the level, I have to collect other data points. This process is exceptionally time consuming. I am on my 7th hour completing it.
I also get bogged down in a lot of paperwork, just creating the packets that I need for my students. It can be really hard trying to make sure that you have everything ready for any kid at any given time. We only have one copy machine in this building for about 30 or 40 teachers.
Right now we have 2 machines. One is down and one only works on tray 2. It's been this way for 2 weeks.
So we put in the paper, and now it is the mystery hunt for the missing piece of paper. Don't worry, we have 3 minutes before all the kids arrive. Yeah.
The paperwork is never ending.
So I hope you can see that research was pretty powerful for us to see. It's one thing to sit around and imagine what teachers might need, but then when you see them and hear them in their own words tell you the problems in the school, it's really eye-opening. So we found that most of the responses, we distilled it down into a few categories, and a lot of things had to do with these kind of faulty systems that were in place that were wasting time and keeping them from doing the one thing that they wanted to do, which was teach. So we ended up with this single guiding principle for the project: less teching, more teaching. So it was very clear teachers were not asking for the next all-in-one, futuristic, education-in-a-box kind of package. They just wanted more time to teach. But we couldn't just think about teachers because the education community is a bit larger. So we thought about the 4 kind of major roles within that community. First of all, admins, the IT people who maintain school technology and discover it and have that dialogue with teachers. Then, of course, teachers and students. How can teachers better engage with their students or make things more efficient, especially if they're overwhelmed with a lot of kids in a class, but do that in a way where technology isn't in the way, where you're not introducing yet another thing that they have to do. And then, of course, the parents. Parents would like to be involved. They want to be active for the most part, but there's definitely a line where you don't need them entirely involved in a classroom. So what is the right balance where everybody can participate? And the way we did this was, again, by making videos. So we brainstormed a lot. We had a lot of ideas of what the product could be, some good, some bad. And we condensed what we thought was the best ideas down into these kind of structured narratives. It goes pretty deep, and there's actually a lot to talk about in this world, but I just want to play one quick video to give you an idea of how this felt. So this is a condensed version from one of the teacher videos.
Miss Foote is a 5th grade teacher at Lawndale Elementary. Tonight, she's creating a social studies lesson. She used to spend hours searching for inspiration across the web and the many, many separate places there are to search for apps, videos, and other things. But now, she only needs to do one search in Homeroom's library to see lots of educational content across different platforms, including lessons other teachers have made and shared for common use via Homeroom's lesson forking community. Ms. Foote takes a look at her student snapshots, which give her a picture of each student's recent grades, participation, and improvements. Ms. Foote wants to update her principal about what's been going on in her class. Homeroom helps her by automatically creating a class snapshot, showing what she's been teaching across each subject and how her kids are doing. Later, when she's picking up supplies for the class play, she gets an alert on her phone that next week she'll have a new transfer student, Maureen. Maureen's previous school also used Homeroom, so Maureen and her parents get to keep all their stuff on Homeroom at Lawndale too.
So again, you can think of that as a concept sketch. None of these features are real quite yet, but it starts to give a little bit of direction or possibilities of what it could be. We continue to work that way with the team up until the launch of Classroom in May 2014. And that started with a few pilot tests. For example, this one at Fontbonne Academy in Brooklyn. And I actually was in this classroom off to the left, in the corner somewhere, observing. And this was really fascinating for me to see because, first of all, it took me back to my school days and walking through the halls and following the bells, seeing people gossip and not pay attention. But then the world is, you can see it changing because you have all these kind of disconnected devices in there, and you really get a sense of what's happening. So this was really great to be a part of. And then soon after that, Classroom launched publicly, and since September, it's been available for any teacher to use for free. So let me just show you a few of the early features. The first version of Classroom really focused on the most basic things that a teacher needs, according to the feedback and the research we did. And the first one, being pretty obvious, is a way to turn in assignments and grade those and give them back. So this was a very early sketch of that idea. And then here it is in the current version of the product. The product's been out for about 6 months, and there's been over 30 million assignments that have been turned in, which is pretty crazy if you imagine all that running through copy machines. And then another one that I wanted to mention was we had this thought of being able to take a picture of notes or an assignment and being able to turn it in that way. I think this is really important because we all use our phone cameras to take pictures of things like this, and not always snapshots. So why shouldn't students do the same? And also, we never want this to be kind of a replacement for certain things that are in classrooms. It's the way we use our own technology, right? We still have notepads, we still do things by hand. So a student can still do that, but then turn it in digitally so that it's archived a bit better. And there it is in the current product. This was just launched in this past January. And then one ongoing thing that continues to happen is teachers come into the office and they file feature requests and they give feedback. They say what's working and what's not. So I really feel like this project has been as much about listening as actually making things. And that's about all the time I have. I have 20 seconds left. But I just want to end on this thought. Life is greater than tech. So when I think about what design can do, I think that it can allow us to make things, but it can also allow us to listen to each other, to learn things, and to guide technology to give access to what we truly care about. Thank you.
Steve, thank you. That was terrific. And we've actually got some questions from the audience.
Okay.
So I'm going to, and they're largely technical and they relate to Project Loon, but they're not too technical.
Okay.
I think I might know the answer to the first, because one is from Linda, which is what about the aeroplanes? But I think these are in the stratosphere.
Yeah, much higher than an airplane flies. So yeah, 20 kilometers up is right at the edge of the atmosphere.
Right. But Glenn asks the question, is there a limit on web speed when you're transmitting from up in the stratosphere?
I mean, it's still under development, so the technology continues to improve. In the New Zealand launch, it was at 3G speeds, but I think now it's LTE for the Brazil launch. And so I think as the team keeps building, they're trying to make that faster, but it's a pretty standard connection.
And I wanted to ask you about, in a way, how you perceive your role in Google, because it was very interesting. We heard this morning Michael Johnson talking about his work, what he's doing with not-for-profits. And I was looking at what you're doing, where there's a lot of storytelling, there's a lot of positioning of Google, but also, and in a way I was almost asking myself, well, so working in the lab, and for you, what motivates you? Do you feel that it's mostly about innovation or communication or a bit of both, or what is the role in a way?
Yeah, definitely a bit of both. It leans into the communication side because that's the background of most people working, going back to the kind of Lego slides I had.
Yeah.
A lot of people come from an advertising or a design studio background, and the skill set is kind of around communication. But there's this interesting thing that when an engineering team is working on something, they're focusing on these very hard problems to solve. Loon, how do you get these balloons to float, and how do they connect? All these things, they hit all these roadblocks, and they're very focused on just getting that to function. Obviously, it needs to function. But we're in this unique role where we can kind of take a step back and almost think about it naively. So from a position like an ordinary person. Be like, well, what does this really mean? Like, what is the potential of it? And it's with substance. You know, we are designers and communicators, and so there's always a bit of surface to that. But it's a surface of something real. So there's definitely a real commitment to making sure that story is told honestly. And I think that really can be very powerful, especially in something like Classroom, where you can tell that story first to the team, and it kind of almost makes them realize, oh, this is what we're trying to build.
You have, to finish with, I know you have some sort of values within the Creative Lab itself that you look for in your recruits. And I guess a lot of people here are going to be thinking, yeah, it's be quite interesting to come work for Google. But you do actually try to recruit people.
Yes.
So what do you look for?
Actually, I did want to mention we are hiring. So if anyone's interested, you can definitely find me somewhere else in the conference. But I think the main thing, it's hard to describe, but I feel like one of the things that people really have to want to do, I mentioned it when I was talking about Loon in the beginning, is not be afraid to just make stuff. I know that sounds like it could be a bit of a cliche, but really to get traction on an idea, especially in a big company like that, the more tangible you can make it and the more quickly, even if it is a bit of just a concept, that can just really make things move. And so I think whether you're a writer or a business person or anything, just so there needs to be some tangible output that you can constantly do, because we make tons of work and we throw a lot of work out, but that really keeps things going.
Okay, well, you heard it here, and he's around. And Steve, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.